Well, politics is interesting because those of us whose lives revolve around, including Andrew Cornell and myself, we're focused and sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees. And that's why I've invited the lead advisor at GT Communications, Liz Storer, to join me now. Someone who's interested in politics but doesn't live for it like we do every single day. Liz, welcome to the show. I appreciate your time. You've heard my editorial, you heard what Andrew had to say. Are we missing something here? Is the real world disconnected from our concerns inside the Beltway?
Yeah, look, I think that's often the case. It's inevitable. It really is. You say I'm further outside the bubble, but I did work in politics for almost 10 years. Some years ago. So I know exactly what it's like. You know, we can't see the forest for the trees half the time because people like you, and it used to be I as well, live and breathe this stuff. We're across the headlines, we're on our news feeds, we're in the media constantly keeping abreast of everything that's going on, especially during sitting weeks, etc. and so on. And that is simply not the reality of any mainstream Australian. They're busy going about their lives. They've got very different concerns, and they're actually not all that across the ins and outs of politics and who said what and etc. and so on, which we obsess on almost on a daily basis across news channels.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know a single person who thinks that a man in a position of authority like the Prime Minister consulting with his wife about issues that are specific to women to get another perspective on it is somehow wrong. And yet in the political world, according to the media bubble, it's a great crime. And it goes on, having your wife in a photo with you. This is really, I said below the belt stuff, but it is just sort of the obsession of the Canberra bubble rather than what people are concerned about, which is jobs, how am I going to pay my bills, and are my kids getting a decent education?
Yeah, the agenda is clear here, Cory. The mainstream media has a very clear agenda. They've co-opted all the women's marches, the Brittany Higgins saga, etc. and so on. It's very obvious to anyone paying attention. There is a very clear agenda here, and that is to unseat the government. They're working around the clock to make the coalition government look like a pile of sex pests. You know, we saw, you've already mentioned the poll that came out recently where the vote among women has dropped by 15% in terms of popularity and how they relate to the coalition government. I'm not surprised, because if all you're looking at is the odd headline here and there, it does look like a really bad zoo is operating out of the coalition government. But again, if you're paying attention, you know there's not even a handful of allegations brought against even a handful of members. And yet we've got Labor, we've got the Greens taking this all the way to the bank. It was just this morning, Labor Senator Katie Gallagher was on national TV going, clearly the PM has a problem with women. She was being asked about this Holgate case, which again, the mainstream media are bending over backwards to make about the fact that Holgate's a woman, which has absolutely nothing to do with anything in this case. It was all about optics, and the optics wouldn't have been any better were she a man. But here's Katie Gallagher, just like it's a statement of fact, you know, well, we already know the PM has an issue with women. He's got a problem with women. She repeatedly said this. Now, this is just being swallowed,
Liz,
hook, line and sinker by some.
Can I get your opinion on this, right? It's not about so much the Australia Post Holgate, who's right, he said, she said stuff, but we are constantly told now we are not, as men, because we're the wrong gender, we're not allowed to comment on what a woman is wearing until or unless you're celebrating the political statement they're wearing by wearing their white jackets, as they all did in the Senate inquiry earlier this week.
Oh, give me a break.
Did that strike me as just hypocrisy, right? It was a powerful statement, yeah. But when you think about it, we've been prohibited from making these comments, and yet now it's their personal weaponhood.
Yeah, look, honestly, I actually thought this was ridiculous by the women involved. You are not the suffragettes. You have no idea what those women went through and the rights that they were fighting for. We here in the 21st century never will, to be honest. I mean, they were fighting for what we'd call bread and butter rights, you know, the right to vote, not because they thought they were better than men, but just because they were like, hey, we too contribute and therefore we're due a vote. These guys wearing white, I just thought was the biggest joke ever. And I take your point, Cory. Men are now practically forbidden saying anything about women, much less their attire. And now it's perfectly okay for you to praise, for as long as you like, the fact that, you know, what a powerful statement that they're wearing white, just like the suffragettes, and they're standing for their values and principles. I mean, it's just an absolute joke, honestly. It's either laugh or cry at this point in regards to the cause these women think that they're fighting for.
Well, Liz, I've got to go, but I'm going to test the metal here and say you look lovely, and what a powerful statement that was. So please just accept it gracefully.
Many thanks, Cory. Don't stop complimenting women. We love it. We actually love it. The vast majority of us do.
I will take that to heart. Thanks for your time tonight.